Hi, everyone. Thanks very much for coming to this presentation. We'll be looking today at the findings and practical implications of some research that I've been doing with teachers of English for academic purposes, or EAP. And we'll start with a little background, and then I'll describe the research and the main findings. And then we'll talk about what this might mean for us in our own classrooms and programs. That'll take about 30 minutes, and then we'll have time for questions. Also, I'll be posting this recording on my own website, so feel free to visit there if you like afterwards too. Besides the study that I'm describing here today, there's lots of information on that website about other related studies about this general topic that I'll be talking about today, learning transfer. If you visit, I'd love to hear any of your ideas about the topic and how it relates to your own work. The website address is on the bottom of this slide, and it'll appear on the final slide at the end of the presentation too. So here's an overview of today's presentation, and this is the summary that's included in the TESOL Convention's presentation schedule. A central purpose of ESOL education is promoting students' transfer of learning to new situations beyond the ESOL classroom. Previous research focused on students, so this study examined another important perspective: teachers' perceptions of transfer promoting practices and associated challenges. Practical techniques and solutions for challenges will be discussed. And just a heads up that the study that I'm describing here was published just a few months ago in the Journal of English for Academic Purposes. So if you'd like more detail than what we cover here today in the presentation, you can find out more about it there. And feel free to reach out to me with any questions too. I'm always happy to help out in that way as well. So this study focused on a particular problem, which was that EAP courses have a basic purpose of teaching students knowledge and skills that will help them as they work through their academic programs. So whatever knowledge and skills students learn in an EAP course, they should be able to transfer out of the course to their other courses. This sounds straightforward enough, but there has been lots of research on learning transfer in educational psychology, and it has shown that learning doesn't automatically lead to transfer. So that means that as EAP teachers, we might find that students learn and perform well in our course, but when they leave the course, they don't necessarily make use of what they had learned. In other words, they don't transfer the learning. There are things that we can do to try to avoid this situation, but those things aren't always obvious or easy to do. And that's reflected in this quote, which says that EAP teachers can struggle with teaching for transfer. So this is the general problem that my study was focusing on, and I was hoping to look for a variety of possible solutions. So let's take a closer look here at this idea of teaching for transfer. First, learning transfer is seen as happening in two main ways, called low-road transfer and high-road transfer. Low-road transfer is transfer that happens automatically, like when I get behind the wheel of a car that I've never driven before, but I'm able to drive it without any thought because everything I've learned from driving other cars before transfers automatically to this new situation because of all the similarities, like a steering wheel and foot pedals that are similar to the steering wheels and foot pedals in all of the other cars that I've driven before. And the other kind of transfer, high-road transfer, is very different because instead of being automatic, it's intentional. For example, instead of a new car, maybe I find myself sitting on a motorcycle for the first time. The motorcycle doesn't have a steering wheel or pedals, so I don't automatically transfer things that I've learned from driving cars. But when I'm on that motorcycle, maybe I intentionally think about strategies that I've used before when I've driven cars, like not getting too close to other vehicles. And I try to do the same thing on the motorcycle. In this case, transfer happens even though the two situations, cars that I've driven in the past and the motorcycle I'm sitting on now, aren't so similar. So with that in mind, there are practical suggestions available for how to teach in ways that will help to promote low-road and high-road transfer. A technique for promoting low-road transfer is called hugging, and that means designing instruction to be similar to target situations. So for example, if I'm teaching an EAP course and the students are engineering majors, I might try to design the EAP course so that it has similarities with the students' engineering courses, maybe similar kinds of activities and similar kinds of content. On the other hand, a technique for promoting high-road transfer is called bridging, And that means teaching in a way that gets students to think abstractly about what they're learning and to think about how they might transfer learning. For example, in my EAP course, I might ask students to look at examples of academic writing and figure out what it is that makes those examples effective. This way, the students are coming up with abstract principles, and that kind of learning can be transferred to a wide variety of situations. And one more point here is that these teaching for transfer techniques aren't unusual. Even without focusing on transfer, EAP teachers may already be using activities that are similar to target situations, and may already be getting students to learn abstractly. But it may be the case that these kinds of techniques are being used only occasionally, and not enough to really maximize the students' learning transfer. So, with this problem and background information in mind, I put together a study based on these research questions. 1. How, if at all, do EAP teachers self-reportedly promote students' learning transfer? And 2. What challenges, if any, do EAP teachers self-reportedly experience in promoting students' learning transfer? And to answer those questions, here's what I did. In fall 2019 and spring 2020, I contacted EAP teachers at a university and community colleges in a major metropolitan area here in the US to ask if I might be able to interview them. 26 teachers agreed, and I interviewed each of them once, mostly in person, and the final few were remote because of the pandemic. The interviews were semi-structured, so I used a set of general questions about teaching for transfer, and we had lots of flexibility to talk about their answers. And I recorded all the interviews so I could transcribe and analyze them later. So we'll take a look now at the main findings, and we'll start with the first research question, which asked, how, if at all, do EAP teachers self-reportedly promote students' learning transfer? And the findings showed that all of these teachers did promote transfer in one or more ways. The teachers' self-reported efforts can be placed into 6 categories, which you can see on this slide. The first category is telling students that learning can transfer directly, and 17 of the teachers said that they did this. In other words, these teachers said they told students that the students can apply their developing EAP abilities directly in situations outside the course, for example, in other courses, in graduate programs, and in workplaces. And this application might lead to outcomes like less stress or more success. The second category is having students practice authentically, and 17 of the teachers said they did this. In other words, these teachers said that they had students practice using their academic English knowledge and skills, in many cases with materials, topics, and activities that students would encounter outside the EAP course, for example, in their other courses or in their personal lives. The teachers described various ways that they had students do this kind of practice, including having students interact with each other and one-to-one with the instructor, or encouraging students to attend extracurricular tutoring sessions, or having students blog or free write. The third category is demonstrating with examples, and 14 of the teachers said they did this. In other words, these teachers said they gave students examples of procedures that the students were expected to be able to use. For example, steps for doing research, or products that the students were expected to be able to generate. For example, an effective paragraph. The examples the teachers said they gave were from their own experience as students, for example, having taken business courses themselves, or as employees, for example, as a teacher, as a writer in corporate and industrial workplace settings, these kinds of things. Or examples that they found online, for example, TED Talks or commercial ads. The fourth category is encouraging students to think abstractly, and 3 of the teachers said they did this. In other words, these teachers said that they asked students to describe general principles or procedures like grammar rules, writing conventions, or steps in a writing process, or that the teachers themselves described such principles or procedures to the students. The fifth category is asking students how they might be able to transfer learning, and 2 of the teachers said they did this. In other words, these teachers said that they questioned students about transfer, either informally as part of class discussions or formally as required written reflections on completed assignments. This questioning was done with a target context in mind. For example, asking students how they can use what they have learned in the EAP course in their major areas of study. Or sometimes without a target context in mind. For example, the teacher asked students what they can do with what they have learned in the EAP course, in any context outside the course. And the sixth category is having students practice writing the same content for different audiences. And this was mentioned by one teacher. When asked about any efforts to promote transfer, this teacher referred to an e-portfolio tool that students were required to use. And the teacher stated that having students post their work on 2 different digital platforms, in other words, using the e-portfolio tool, which is for sharing work mainly with just an instructor, and also having them post it on a blog, which is for sharing work with a larger audience. The teacher said that this should help with transfer. So that's a snapshot of the answer to the first research question. And let's move on now to the second research question. So as a reminder, the second research question asked, what challenges, if any, do EAP teachers self-reportedly experience in promoting students' learning transfer? And the findings here showed that all of these teachers experienced one or more challenges. The teachers' self-reported challenges can be placed into 9 categories, which you can see on this slide. The first category is curriculum relevance, and 20 of the teachers said they experienced this challenge. In other words, these teachers said that their efforts to promote transfer were influenced by disconnection between the EAP course and students' needs or goals. The majority of these reports were about the students being from a wide range of major areas of study, or having a wide range of post-graduation goals. In addition, some reports were about the students not needing academic English skills after they graduate, for example, because they will not have academic careers or they will live in countries where English is not widely used. Or other courses being substantially different from the EAP course, for example, because they're large lecture courses. The second category is student effect, and 13 of the teachers said they experienced this challenge. In other words, these teachers said that their efforts to promote transfer were influenced by students' affective reactions to the EAP course. Almost all of these reports were about students' limited motivation to learn and transfer learning from the EAP course. This category also included reports about students' reactions to particular kinds of class activities. More specifically, that students disliked working collaboratively or were afraid of writing. The third category is curriculum flexibility, and this was mentioned by 12 teachers. These teachers said that their efforts to promote transfer were influenced by limitations in the flexibility of the EAP course curriculum. Most of the reports were about the general structure of the EAP course in terms of time or content. In other words, that there was a limited amount of time available or a large amount of required content to be covered. This category also included reports about more specific requirements for teaching the EAP course, including being required to use a particular digital tool, to include a particular number of assignments, or to include particular types of assignments. The fourth category is student ability or experience, and 12 of the teachers said they experienced this challenge. In other words, these teachers said that their efforts to promote transfer were influenced by limitations in the ability or experience students brought to the EAP course. Most of these reports were about students' ability, and this included general ability, in other words, students' limited current second language proficiency, as well as abilities more specifically related to teaching for transfer. For example, students not being able to see connections between courses, and students not being able to understand a particular teaching technique. This category also included reports about students' experience. These were reports that students had not had experience with particular teaching techniques, such as being asked to write long essays. The fifth category is teacher ability, and this was mentioned by 11 of the teachers. These teachers said that their efforts to promote transfer were influenced by limitations in their own knowledge. Almost all of these reports were about limitations in teachers' knowledge of contexts where they hoped students would transfer learning. In addition, this category included reports of limitations in participants' knowledge about teaching tools, for example, digital technology, or teaching techniques, for example, how to get students to generalize learning. The sixth category is teaching support, and 7 of the teachers said they experienced this challenge. In other words, these teachers said that their efforts to promote transfer were influenced by having received a limited amount of professional support from administrative staff or other colleagues. Some of these reports were relatively general, referring to not feeling part of a professional community, or having too few faculty meetings, or being uncertain about how administrative staff would like faculty to teach. Other reports were more specific, referring to colleagues' limited interest in transfer or limited use of a particular teaching technique, or referring to a lack of transfer-specific teaching guidelines, or referring to teacher training having a lack of attention to learning transfer. The 7th category is teacher time, and this was mentioned by 6 of the teachers. These teachers said that their efforts to promote transfer were influenced by limits on their time. Keep in mind here that another challenge, one of the previous ones, is curriculum flexibility, and that's also related to teachers' time. But that challenge is about limited time within the EAP course. This challenge is about limited time outside the EAP course. So some of these teachers referred generally to a lack of time that they had. Others explained more specifically that their time was limited because in addition to teaching EAP courses, they also taught other courses or were involved in the development of online versions of courses. The 8th category is teacher affect, and 2 of the teachers said they experienced this challenge. In other words, these teachers said that their efforts to promote transfer were influenced by their affective states. More specifically, this included teachers' references to having either low confidence or high anxiety about teaching. These teachers also offered reasons for these affective states. One teacher explained that it was the result of concern about being a non-native speaker of English. The other teacher explained that it was the result of concern about how students would react to the teacher's personality. And the 9th and final category is student time, and this was mentioned by 2 teachers. These teachers said that their efforts to promote transfer were influenced by students' time restrictions outside the EAP course. And again, keep in mind that another challenge, curriculum flexibility, is also related to students' time. But that challenge, again, is about limited time within the EAP course, whereas this challenge is about students' limited time outside the EAP course. Both of the teachers who reported such time restrictions referred specifically to students taking a large number of other courses or academic credits in addition to the EAP course. So that wraps up our look at the answer to the second research question, and let's move on now to a brief discussion of what these findings might mean. First, the findings showed that these teachers did appear to be making efforts to teach for transfer. And this includes a variety of techniques. So one implication in the first bullet here is that EAP teachers can be encouraged to look at what they're already doing in class, because they might already be using techniques that can promote transfer. And if so, they can keep using those techniques. But they might also notice that they're using a limited number of techniques, perhaps just 1 or 2. So they might consider using other techniques like some of the ones listed here, or that are described in publications on teaching for transfer. This way, teachers can try to really saturate their course with teaching for transfer. Moving to the second bullet, we also need to make sure teachers are getting feedback on their use of these techniques. Quite a few of the teachers said that they were unsure if their teaching for transfer techniques actually worked, because they had no way of knowing what students did after they left the EAP course. But there might be ways to get transfer-related feedback from students while they're still in an EAP course. For example, by asking them if they are transferring learning to other courses that they're taking at the same time as the EAP course, or by asking them about ways that they plan to transfer learning to other courses in the future. This kind of information could be easy to get and might be satisfying for teachers who are working hard to teach for transfer. And for the final bullet, the findings of this research point in specific directions we could take to try to make teaching for transfer a little easier for EAP teachers. For example, to deal with a curriculum that lacks specificity, a teacher could look for ways to make the curriculum more specific. For example, by seeing if students can be grouped based on major. That way, the EAP course could be designed to match the courses in the student's major, and that would help with low road transfer. Or if that's not possible, a teacher could try to use techniques that promote high road transfer, such as encouraging students to think abstractly and asking students how they might be able to transfer learning. Because high road transfer can happen regardless of the connection between an EAP course and students' majors. The second example, to deal with students' affective issues, a teacher could use techniques for increasing transfer motivation, like making sure the students know that transfer can have benefits, like getting higher grades in other courses, and making sure the students see improvements in their EAP skills and knowledge, so they will have the confidence to transfer those skills and knowledge when opportunities come up. The third example, to deal with a curriculum that lacks flexibility, a teacher could find teaching techniques that are relatively easy to insert into classes and don't take much time, like just asking students to brainstorm about where they think they might be able to transfer knowledge and skills outside the EAP course. And the fourth example, to deal with gaps in the student's ability, a teacher can use teaching for transfer techniques with whatever knowledge and skills the students need to learn. For example, if students need to focus on basic grammar, the teacher could have the students practice using a grammar structure in activities that resemble activities in their other courses. And that would be a way of promoting low road transfer. And the teacher could have the students look at examples of the grammar structure and then try to come up with the general rule on their own. And this would be a way to help promote high road transfer. Teaching for transfer techniques can be used with any kind of knowledge and skills, not only higher level academic knowledge and skills. So that's about it. That was the study, and from my angle, it's been really interesting looking at these teachers' perspectives on teaching for transfer. I hope you found the summary useful and that it's given you some practical ideas. So we'll end the recording here, and if you have any questions or comments, I'd love to hear them during the scheduled question and answer period or by email anytime. Thank you again for watching.